It's time for the 420 Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Transcripts of 420 Radio News are available daily on our website at 420radio.org. Now, here's Priscilla Simon.
From Colorado, it's your 420 Radio News for Friday, August 1st, 2014. The Brookings Institute, a nonprofit public policy organization based in Washington, D.C., has issued a report entitled, "Colorado's Rollout of Legal Marijuana is Succeeding." Quote, "At its heart, this report is about good government and takes no position on whether the legalization of retail marijuana was the correct decision," end quote, writes John Hudak, a fellow in governance studies. Quote, "The rollout initial implementation of legal retail marijuana has been largely successful," end quote. He continues, citing, quote, "leadership by state officials, a cooperative, inclusive approach centering on task forces and working groups, substantial efforts to improve administrative communication, adaptive regulation that embraces regulatory look-back and process-oriented learning, reorganizing, rebuilding, and restaffing critical state regulatory institutions, and changes in culture in state and local government among these groups and among the public," end quote, as factors contributing to the success.
Yeah, we can't read too much into this. This isn't the guy coming out and saying, hey, legalizing pot was the right thing to do. What he's saying is that they decided to legalize pot, and in doing so, government-wise, it's going well, right? Like the institutions are working, the taxes are being collected, the regulations are doing what we said they would do. So in that way, it's good governance, it's good public policy. But regardless, this still comes out as good news for the marijuana legalization movement. It just goes to show that if the government gets behind it, and that's something this guy pointed out too, is that, you know, even though Hickenlooper and the rest of the government in Colorado was against this legalization, once it passed, they said, hey, well, this is the will of the people. We got to be, you know, good stewards of public policy. We've got to cooperate. They brought in people in task forces. They brought in some supporters. They brought in people from all around, you know, different agencies to work on this and to collaborate. And by and large, it's gone very, very well. So it just goes to show, folks, in other states that legalization can work. It's not impossible. It's just a matter of voting it in and having the right kind of leadership behind it.
ABC News can't resist the pot pun in declaring that Uruguay's attempt to become the first nation with legalized marijuana may be, quote, going up in smoke. The ruling board front movement of President Jose Mujica, who championed the unpopular legalization plan, faces an uphill battle in maintaining the presidency and control of the legislature. 64% of Uruguayans oppose the legalization plan, and 62% would like to see it repealed entirely, a stand being taken by most of the top opposition candidates. Mujica is among 7 candidates for president, none of whom has the support to win outright without a runoff election. Polls show 40% of the public intends to vote for the ruling Board Front coalition, which would require 50% of the vote to maintain its legislative control.
Yes, the Broad Front coalition, but
sorry, Broad Front.
That's okay. Broad Front, and understand that we're talking about a legislature and a government that's run in a kind of a parliamentary system, right? So there's lots of different parties. It's not just Republican, Democrat, and a bunch of third parties that never have any chance. This is a government where, you know, like most governments in the world, they have to come up with coalitions. They have to come up with groups of parties that will rule together. And so far, this Broad Front coalition, it's the leftist party that Mujica's a part of, plus a couple of others. They're maintaining, you know, a very slim control over the legislature right now, and it looks like they're going to lose some seats according to the most recent polls in Uruguay. So you're going to have a legislature that's going to be against it. You're going to have, if Mujica can't retain his presidency and one of the other candidates takes over, the guy who's in second place right now says he wants to repeal the part that says that marijuana can be sold in pharmacies. So it'd still be legal. You know, you could have it, but you wouldn't have any legal place to get it. And a lot of the other candidates just want to repeal the whole thing entirely and just, you know, stick with the prohibition that they already have. And like the polls show, at least 6 out of 10 of the public in Uruguay is against marijuana legalization. And most of that's not because there's against marijuana per se. It's really just a lack of education and a feeling that, drugs are drugs. All drugs are bad. Okay. And so they've got to be against marijuana legalization. This just shows why it's so important to strike while the iron is hot. We had people saying, don't go for legalization in 2014, wait for 2016. And I say, no, we got to move while the iron is hot. You never know who's going to be in office. You never know how the public mood is going to shift. And I really wish Mujica and his government was able to implement more of this a little bit faster before the next ruling party comes in and makes it all go up in smoke.
New emergency rules for marijuana edibles were adopted Thursday in Colorado. No longer will manufacturers be able to pack 100 milligrams of THC into a bite-sized edible. 100 milligrams is still the maximum that can be packaged into an edible, but it must now be easily broken into 10 milligram segments, the standard serving size under the law. Single-serving edibles must be delivered in child-resistant packaging by the infused products maker, as must liquids like sodas, which must clearly display the serving size on the package or bottle. The rules will be made permanent after a public comment period and will go into effect November 1st.
For the most part, the industry has already moved toward this. What I read from the marijuana industry group, and I talk to some of these infused product makers in Colorado, they're already making 10 milligrams, the standard. They're already making the chocolate bars scored so that they can, break into individual pieces. And this is just another example of how regulation works. When the Brookings Institute issued that report, they did point out that, edibles was one of the bumps in the road. But this just goes to show that once you got regulation in play, when you do run into a problem, you can solve it. You can do something intelligent to solve it. Just saying no doesn't solve it. And this is the better choice. I know some people complain about, I have a high tolerance and I need 100 milligram, candy to even feel any effect. But I think that's just one of the compromises we're going to have to make until legalization becomes more widespread. There's better cultural and social acceptance and understanding of what edibles do, and the better education among the public about how to use these things.
Right. Fairgoers at this weekend's Denver County Fair get to enjoy the spectacle of marijuana-themed events, but none of the marijuana. Quote, "We've been selling tickets to people from all over the world, and we keep hearing they want to come see the pot," end quote, said Dana Kane, who helped organize Denver County Fair 3 years ago. This year's event is expected to draw 20,000 people. There's no actual marijuana at the 21 and older pot pavilion. Rather, joint rolling contests use oregano. Photos of competing pot plants are shown, and the judges sampled the marijuana edibles earlier last month at an undisclosed location. Quote, "At first, the judges were eating them all, but by the end, they were really feeling it. So they just tasted them and spit them out," end quote, Kane said with a laugh. Quote, "We offered them cabs home. Good thing. Good thing."
Yeah, I've always wondered about these edible judging competitions. It's bad enough when we're talking about cannabis cups and stuff when you're judging oil or you're judging flour and, 7, 8 strains in, you're like bombed. But it's got to be worse with edibles, I'd imagine. I always liked the way we did it here in Oregon with the Oregon Medical Cannabis Awards. We give the judges their 28 different samples, and they had 28 days to sample them. So they could just do one each day. I can't imagine you get any decent judgment out of an edible after you've done 6 or 7 of them. It'd be kind of hard to tell, wouldn't it?
People who supported legalization are nevertheless upset when you blow smoke around their kids. In an article posted to the Seattle Times, writer Jonathan Martin complains about visiting a local park with his children when pot smokers nearby wouldn't stop publicly toking upwind. Another Seattleite, Natalie Singer-Veluche, protested that she and her kids were enveloped in pot smoke at a local beach. Web content manager Stephanie Klein argues that her neighbors smoke pot in their backyard daily and the smoke infiltrates her home. Quote, "It seriously fills up my whole downstairs. I can smell it through my house, even upstairs when I'm trying to sleep," Klein says. Quote, I voted for I-502. I don't care that they're smoking pot at all, but now I have to deal with my 4-year-old who's saying, the neighbors are stinky again, Mommy. What am I supposed to tell him? End quote.
Tell him that your neighbors are, pot smokers and that pot smells and that it's legal now. And sometimes people do things that are stinky, but in a society we have to tolerate all kinds. I mean, what else are we supposed to tell? I mean, cigars.
What do you tell a cigarette smoker?
Yeah, cigars smell. If they were out back smoking cigars, what would you do? Well, whatever that is, do that for pot. See, part of the problem here is that we make it legal for people. We don't give them any public place to smoke. If you don't like pot smoking at the park, give us a public place to smoke pot. You don't like pot smoking at the beach, put off a place off to the side of it where we can smoke pot. You don't like pot smoking at a concert, well, you just haven't been to a concert in 40 years.
What kind of concert is that? San Bernardino, California is bankrupt, so the city council is considering an idea President Obama laughed at 5 years ago, legalizing and taxing marijuana to improve the economy. The city of over 200,000 declared bankruptcy in 2012 and is one of about 200 California municipalities that have enacted outright bans on all medical marijuana dispensaries. Despite the ban, there are about 20 legal storefronts selling marijuana, which cost the city $10,000 each to investigate and shut down. Quote, prohibiting them is obviously not working. It's almost easier to regulate it than prohibit it, end quote, said one city council member, James Mulville. He estimates the current plan, calling for 6 or fewer legal dispensaries, could raise $60,000 in fees plus 10% in taxes, which Mulville insists is only a desperate funding measure, not any sort of compassion for patients in his city. Quote, I'm doing this because of the trouble we're in. We can't control it, he said. I'm not doing this for the potheads.
Yeah, let's not do anything for the cancer patients who are still having to go to illegal storefront dispensaries to be able to get their medicine. Well, okay, if he's not going to do it for the right reason, at least he's going to do it for the wrong reason. I don't care as long as you're doing it, as long as you're providing access for these people. I don't care if you hate them, if you think they're stinky, or if you think they're a bunch of potheads. Legalize and regulate it. And it could be it's easier to regulate than prohibit it. Right. Duh. That's what we've all discovered. That's what everyone is discovering throughout the country here. And the fact that California's had medical marijuana for 16, 18 years now going on, and are just now, these cities are coming around to it, and only because they're forced into it because of bankruptcy, just shows you how hard people will cling to their bigotry, to their outdated notions and stereotypes of marijuana and its users, despite all facts, logic, science, and reason, and now economic force coming to bear that shows otherwise. Why are these cities so afraid of jobs and tax-paying businesses and people that want to card kids and want to make sure they're following the law so they don't lose their license? When they're an illegal storefront dispensary, you got nothing to hold over their head. They know you can't afford to bust them, so they just stay open. Once you give them a license, now you got something to dangle in front of them if they start getting out of line. God, this is so easy. I mean, y'all figured out Colorado seems to be working there, right?
Oh, yeah. Come on over. Take some notes.
I like how Chris Christie said Colorado would be better without marijuana legalization. Yeah. Maybe you can enjoy the fresh air in Newark. Hey, thanks for the news, Priscilla. We'll see you next week, and happy 420.
Hey,
420 Radio, turning red states and blue states green.
What the authorities should do is decriminalize pot use. You want to do it in your house, not bother anyone? Fine. Go outside with a joint?